Hey everyone, and welcome back to another test-driven development in React Native live stream. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you're joining, either live or in the recording later. This is going to be really fun. To tell you the truth, the first two sessions were things I've done a lot of, but now as we're getting into some refactoring and building out some additional features, this is going to be new, so there's going to be plenty of surprises for all of us, I'm sure. We had some fun ones last week with me implementing a modal that wasn't actually a modal, and so we're going to correct that this week. To recap real quick, as you can see on the screen here with the stream, on our last session we test drove out our first feature of the app. We wrote this end-to-end test here in Detox about our app should allow creating a restaurant. And then as we were building out the app to meet that, the need that test specified, we also wrote a component test for the add restaurant modal, specifically pointing at behavior of the component. And we built out the application to meet those needs. We had a restaurant list screen and an add restaurant modal in there. And we can see that things are working. You can see here, if I click save, our component test is running and automatically updating. And if I run detox here, it's going to rerun the test. We're just going to make sure everything is good. This is always really good to do before you start any new development. Make sure the test suite is nice and green. So it's going to run. Juddy, good to see you. Thank you for saying hey on the chat. It was great to chat with you this week on Twitter and get some suggestions for component libraries. Anyone, please hit me up on Twitter or on Twitch chat or on ReactiveFlex during the week. I love to talk about testing. I would love to hear what your experiences are like in React Native testing, the challenges you've run across, the tricks you've found. It would be really great. So let's chat like Juddy and I chat, and you can chat with him as well. It'll be really great. So, as I said, we test drove out this first feature, and in test-driven development, there's a three-phase process that's usually described. It's red, green, refactor. So we wrote a test and made it red. I've got a little buzz on my phone here. Let me turn the audio off. There we go. We wrote a test and saw it fail, so it was red, and then we made it pass. That's the green step. And now we're on to the refactoring step. Now in refactoring, we look at our code that's covered by tests, that's green, and we see what improvements we can make to it. So that's what we're going to do now. And in a sense, we've already, there's a two-phase process in this outside-in test-driven development, where first we had our red end-to-end test, and as a part of making that green, we wrote a component test that went from red to a green, and we could have done refactoring in there as well. So there's a smaller cycle of unit and component tests that will go from red, green, refactoring, and then an outer loop of red, green, refactoring that you do with the end-to-end tests. So now's our outer level refactoring. So what we're going to do is a few different things. First of all, let me just run that test again. Our app is unbelievably ugly. Like, even for me, and my standards of visual design are so low. The new restaurant button is half under the status bar. You can't even see that there's a text field. When you save the text that shows up on the save screen looks exactly like the text field you entered it into. So this is just a visual disaster. So we got to fix that. But luckily, with our system under test, it's going to be very easy for us to make changes and let the automated test confirm that our app is still working. Another thing we found, I built out something called an add restaurant modal, but we found that it's not actually a modal that appears over anything else. It just plops into the page with everything else. You can see that when I have Sushi Place already on the screen. When I tap new restaurant, that list stays down below. We can't tell which one's which, but it stays down below, and you can see that list is there. So it's not a modal, it's just pushing content down. It's very weird. So we want to make it an actual modal that appears over everything else. And again, our end-to-end test doesn't care. It just cares that when I tap the new restaurant button, there's a text field with an appropriate accessibility ID that I can type into. So I think first, let's not do the modal first, because that could be tricky, and maybe I'll have trouble with that. First, what I want to do is introduce a component library. So if you're actually a good styler and visual designer, you can probably style your components yourself. But not all of us are. Some of us have terrible design sense like I do. And even if you have great design sense, you might want to start from a component library to get some consistency. So today we're going to be using a library, let's see where I hit it, called React Native Elements. This is one that I've used before, and this is one that I'm reaching for again this week. And there's one very specific reason for that. It's the list component. I'm sure some other React Native component libraries have lists, but just to be able to get a list of elements that looks just like the native iOS list, it's very nice. It looks very polished, and that's going to fit our needs really well. There's another few fun features we're going to reach for as well. It provides some button styling, some form styling, so that's really nice. So React Native Elements. Installing it is pretty straightforward. Just like last week, I pre-did the installs. This is kind of like when a cooking show puts the stuff in the oven 30 minutes before the show so it's ready. In the same way, I did my Yarn install 30 minutes before the show. No, not really. It was actually hours and hours before, but Yarn didn't take quite that long to install it. But I've pre-installed React Native Elements. The commands are really simple. You add React Native Elements as well as React Native vector icons. That provides, for example, the icon that shows up here for the disclosure item for the list. And then you run React Native Link, which if you haven't used React Native CLI before, React Native Link will update your native Android and iOS project to copy assets in. In this case, it's copying in the font assets that the vector icons are stored in. So if you run these steps, you'll be good. One thing is that I noticed as you go is like you actually need to run detox build. That redoes the full native build of your app from the start to add those assets in. So you'll need to do that or else you'll get red screens of death saying that font assets can't be found. So once you do that, you're ready to go with React Native Elements. See that Aman himself and CryoHell both said hi. Hey y'all, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it. Chime in on the chat anytime with questions, feedback, suggestions. Really glad you're here joining in. All right, cool. Well, let's move my cheater document screen over to the other screen and we're good to go. So let's just start at the start of the screen. So I'm going to rerun the tests as I go to make sure things are still working, but I'm just going to look at the app and see what's the ugliest. I'm going to run through the detox test again and just see what jumps out at me. So one thing, the fact that the new restaurant button is underneath the status bar is absurd. So we really got to fix that first. I think from playing around with this before that using the button component that's in the React Native Elements might actually help with that, although I might be thinking of React Native navigation. But let's go ahead and switch over to the React Native Elements button and we'll see how it looks. So this is out on our restaurant list. We have a button component that's being imported from React Native, and what we can do is just switch it to be imported from React Native Elements. I believe the button element they have has the same signature, so it can be used interchangeably, so the rest of our code may not even need to change. So let's just save it, and then you see that as I save, our unit test automatically runs and confirms that it's passing. I've set up detox to run manually, so let's go ahead and rerun that and let it go. CryoHealth says, will the session maybe be later available in the video archive? Yes, absolutely. Every week, the recording is available on Twitch, and it's also available on YouTube permanently. So you'll be able to check out the recording either of those times. Okay, so new restaurant is a little bit bigger. It looks like a button now. It's still underneath the top status bar. And I think I'm going to procrastinate on that. I think, I know that when I switch to using a navigation library, we're going to use React Navigation. That actually takes care of it for us. So maybe as a part of this stream, we'll actually put that in. So let's go from here. We've got the button. Our new button works. When we click save or click on new button, save restaurant still looks like an old style button. So let's change that one as well. Let's just copy this. And just while I'm doing this, we saw that our test passed, and so we confirmed that we hadn't broken anything. What have I done? All right. So what happened here? Maybe our unit test failed. Duplicate declaration button. So that's actually really interesting. Our unit test has caught that we have a duplicate declaration here. So that's nice. We've got that instant feedback. We can just save and rerun. It takes a second, and we're good to go. It's passing again. So that's great. Very useful. We'll run the end-to-end test. I suppose I could have just refreshed the simulator, but it's nice just to let the end-to-end test run do it. Now we have 2 buttons and then a super tiny slot in there for our text field. So that's not ideal. So let's change that. Actually, I hadn't noticed the forms component in React Native Elements before, but I just noticed that today, and that looks really nice. A nice little label and a form field itself. So let's give this a try for the first time, and we'll make sure the tests still work and see if we're good to go. All right, so it looks like we want a form label, form input. There's a form validation message too, but we have not built any validation. So we're just gonna go from there and see what happens. Looking down at the docs here, looks like I just popped the label above the input. So let's just do form label. And again, I'm looking at the docs here because I don't know this stuff. Restaurant name. And that's all we need there for the form label. Then for the form input, we still have unchanged text, they said. And so hopefully also, it says that the form input inherits all native text input props. So the value field should work just fine. Hopefully the test ID does as well, because this is the ID we use in our automated tests to identify the element. So let's give it a try and see. We'll save that and see how the unit test works. It passes, so that's great. We've gotten feedback that our unit test was able to get this text field already. So let's run the end-to-end test and see how it works and see how it looks. And it's interesting because Detox runs at like a little bit faster than normal speed. I can actually sort of tell that I can follow along with it. Cool. Well, so the look of that form, like that is a nice little form field. The spacing of it is not perfect, but like let's just get our components all laid out. You know, to tell you the truth, like I'm so bad at user interfaces that I may not be very motivated to move spacing around stuff and things like that. So we're just going to have to see. So let's leave this now. I know the next thing, we are going to have to fix that modal again, like I said. But the other thing is just that the list of the restaurants we've already entered still doesn't look like a list. So that's the next thing that's bugging me, so let's do it. And you know, I think honestly, because I'm not very good at visual design, it's nice to separate out building the functionality from implementing the visuals, because it's like, it's stressful to me to think about visuals. Like, there's just so much to do. And so I want to do one thing at a time. That's something that test-driven development is great for. You can focus on building just to get it to pass before you focus on refactoring. And on my work project on Vue.js right now, the same thing is happening. I'm a little overwhelmed by the code, so I just get working, and then from there I tweak it to get things to work optimally. It's a lot nicer just to be able to tweak something and let the test confirm that it's still good than to have to build it out the right way, the final way from scratch, and manually test over and over. Not fun. All right, so we need to put a list in here. We are already using a flat list to render it, which to get that super good performance for our two restaurants on the screen. But a flat list is the right way to do it, and so that's what we want to do. But there is a list component, as I showed earlier, in React Native Elements. And if we scroll down on the page, I think they actually have an example of using this within a flat list. Am I crazy? Let's see here. I feel like I saw that somewhere. It's not like, you know, flat list clearly is not providing any visuals to us, just the performance. Whereas the list, the React Native element list here gives us the visuals. And so I think they can actually work together. Let's give it a try and see. I think I tried that beforehand and it worked okay. So I'm not totally sure. So let's add this in here. I'm always not totally sure. That's the way live streams work. Good times. So there is a component in React Native Elements called list and called list item. I'm not totally sure what visuals the list adds. Maybe we can break it afterwards and see. Like, let's give it a try. But so visually we put, so if flat list is what does the actual iteration, then we'll put the RNE, React Native Elements list around the outside of it. And then when we're rendering the item, instead of text, we're going to render list item. And what do we say? We say title. Yeah, so it's title as an attribute. And it wants that to be the text. And again, the item is just the restaurant title for now. We're going to need to change that later, but that's fine for right now. That'll be a future story that we do that on. All right, so we have a list and then a flat list iterating through outputting list items. There's lists and items going all over the place here. But let's save this. The unit test should be fine because it's not even affecting this class. I think we probably don't need the text component anymore. Yeah, we don't. My linter doesn't show unused variables. I'm starting to regret that. I think I'm going to make a note right now to add unused variables back to linter, because that'd be really nice. It's nice and clean to see that you don't have any unused variables. Let's rerun the test and see, watch and see what our lists look like as they go. Add a restaurant name. Save restaurant. Hey, that looks like an actual list. Like, that's amazing. Really great. And notice that our tests are still passing. So check this out. Like, let's change gears to switch back to that real quick. So in our end-to-end test, we're clicking a new restaurant button, which we've now changed to be a React Native Elements button. We're entering text in a restaurant name text field, which we've now changed to be a React Native Elements form input. And then we're checking on the screen to make sure that there's something with the label of the restaurant name that's visible on the screen somewhere. So because we're using accessibility IDs and accessibility labels to pull up our elements, we were able to change the whole implementation of our app of what components are used in it, and all of our tests still pass. That's really great. That's one of the nice things about not coupling your tests to component types. And let me just take a bit of a great digression to talk about snapshot tests. So snapshot tests can be great when you're refactoring the internal implementation of the functionality of your component, but you want the exact same components to be rendered out to the screen, or markup you would say in a React Web component if you're doing deep rendering. But if you're thinking of changing the subcomponents out, Snapshot Test is going to be rerun, and it's going to show you the diff of what's changed. And so you're now responsible to look through all of the output of the component tree that's sent back by your render method to see if all those changes are intentional or not. So that's heavyweight, and like for the kind of apps that I do, that's not often something that I feel the need to reach for. I'm sure I will at some point to give it a try. If you've used Snapshot Testing and you like it a lot, I'd love to hear it. Please let me know what it's been useful for you for, because that could give me ideas for what to try out. But the kind of approach we're talking about here in test-driven development, where we've driven the functionality of our app, the interactions, the user inputs, and the visual outputs, we can see how we can change the component implementation of our app, and the tests still cover it to show that everything's still working just fine. So I love that flexibility. It's really, really great, and it's motivating for me to be able to swap out the simplest possible components with nicer ones later. Cool. So we've got a bunch of React Native Elements stuff in here. So let's commit that now. I think that's great. Let's just rerun the test real quick to see. I mean, obviously things are not beautiful. You know, one more thing I'd like to do is put in headings. Some headings on the pages just to show us what's going on. And React Native Elements has oops, you get to see my whole screen there. React Native Elements has some text with headings here. That's nice for just this quick iteration. I'm sure I'd have some custom styles on headings in a production app, but this is just going to be a nice way to let us drop in some easy headings in a way that we don't have to think about it very much. And when I don't have to think, that makes me very happy. So we're going to import a text element from React Native Elements. And so now on our restaurant list, let's just pop it in at the top, maybe above the button. Yeah, I think that's good. Text H1. Let's see if that looks too big. Text H1, and then in the add restaurant modal, let's just say add restaurant, and let's assume that's going to be like an H2 or something. And we'll import the text from React Native Elements. Let's rerun the detox test again, and let's just see as we go how it looks. So those are probably too big. You know, I suppose you could maybe restyle the way an H1 and an H2 appears in your app, but we're just trying to iterate quickly here. So let me change the first screen to be an H2 and the modal to be an H3. I'll bet you the first one will be replaced by our navigation ultimately. But let's just see. This does have the nice effect of pushing the button down below the top bar there. That's nice. Cool. That's working. All right, these headings, they're better than nothing. We'll leave it in there. Jody has a comment about snapshot testing. This is great. I like to use snapshot testing to verify different component state. Say if there's a few different props you can pass into a component, a snapshot test can check all those different states at once without the need to set expectations on each different state. Yeah, that's great, and that shows a great reason that has not been needed so far in this very simple app. Yeah, when you have different versions, like like for example, the production app that I'm doing in Vue.js, a lot of our components have a loading state, an error state, and a success state. Some of them maybe have several different types of data they can display. So those would be different states, and those can be useful to have to render out to a snapshot test. I haven't done that before, but that totally makes sense. Jamin, hello Jamin, thanks for joining in. Josh's dulcet tones in the background while I work to relax me, and I'll be speaking your name, Jamin, that I know how to pronounce now after I awkwardly asked about it in person. It was good times. Jamin got to meet him at React Native Chain React Conf, that's the name of the conference, and it was a good time. All right, I'm going to stop talking about Jamin and start talking about testing. All right, so we have now replaced our simple, trivial look and feel of our app with React Native Elements, so let's add that in. Let's commit that. I like to review my changes to see here as we go. We have button form label. Okay, so we're just swapping out some components with React Native Elements. That makes sense. We got some look and feel here. This all makes sense. Yeah, we're just changing out components, but everything else is about the same. Oh yeah, I remember from this, I was going to try and see what happens if I don't have that React Native Elements list around things. So let's commit this, and then we can see. Switch to React Native Elements. All right, so let's figure out what this wrapping list element does here. Say we don't have it. Say we just use a flat list and use a list item underneath directly. In this case, I think I can probably just reload the simulator and get it to see. Let's give it a try. Well, I'd have to step through adding a new restaurant in because it loses the state. I could put in hot reloading, but let's just run the detox test instead. And just a reminder, I'm using this -r flag to reuse the app. This prevents us from having to reinstall the native binary on the app every time. This saves you a couple seconds, which is not a ton, but for test-driven development is really productive. So we rerun the detox test. I can just glance and keep an eye on my app as I go through my different screens as the test runs. It's a nice way just to kind of keep an eye on if anything failed visually. Okay, so I'm going to actually save a screenshot here to compare because I think there were some wrapping visuals that might have changed. Again, I'm not a visual guy, so I don't know for sure. So let's check and see. Okay, yeah, I think I see it. Did you see it? Let's see. So if we compare without the wrapping list and with the wrapping list, you can see that there's some spacing added at the top here and a top border. And so that just kind of makes it, I think that's how they kind of implement, like, hey, every list item has a bottom border, but then the top has the top border and margin. There could be other things as well, but that's at least what that list is adding in. Oh, another thing I see here is that it's just in the, inside the list area here, just the minimal area that we scroll up and down. And so that's not ideal. So actually, let's go and fix that now. But this is enough to convince me that that wrapping list component does provide some benefit there. And this is another great point about test-driven development, actually. You know, it's great to be able to get your code as simple as possible and know that every piece you have in your code is in there for a specific reason. And so test-driven development can help you get there because you only build up the minimal code to get to a solution. But it also allows you, when you're at green, you can play around with the code you've put in. You can think about it. You could say, maybe this isn't needed. Maybe there's a simpler way I can do that. And it encourages you to experiment more to get your code simpler. Whereas when you've had a hard time to build something and you're manually testing it, it's very demotivating to having to change it again because then you'd have to manually retest it again from scratch. Not very fun. So let's give that a try. We want to fix this scrolling problem, but I think actually, yep, that's right. I put the React Native Elements list back in there and we're good to go. Again, I don't use React Native every day, so you might know this better than me, but I think something like a style flex 1 might take care of it. If this doesn't, please jump in and save me on the chat. Let me know what I'm missing here. Flexbox is not something to be taken lightly. So let's see. Our modal is still not a modal, so we'll get to that later. Yeah, that flex is not there. So let's take a look at the docs real quick. I'm going to time box this just to a minute or two to see, because I don't want you to have to watch me relearn Flexbox again on the stream. Flex 1. Do I need to set the flex direction and justify content? For the wrapping view, there's a list there. Let's try, let's see if we put a view around it and we put style flex 1 on that. We'll experiment, and if we can't get there, I'll do it offline so as not to make you follow along for this entire journey. I think it's time for hot reloading. What do you think? I think it's time to not have to rerun through the detox test every time, because the point is to get quick feedback. Well, everything is exploded, so that's excellent. It's not visible. Yeah, so that definitely didn't work. All right, so let's turn on hot reloading. Hot reloading is great when you're on one page and you're just changing the components on it, or certainly the style on it, because that's when it can most easily reload and most reliably. All right, let's get the page back up, and then I think we'll give it a try. All right, the screen is up. Hot reloading is on. And so let's just see. Yep, I can change stuff on here. So list style equals flex 1. Yeah, so that's still not filling it up. So let's do add flex direction and justify content. I have general familiarity with things like Flexbox. I'm going to use them on the web for sure. I check the reference just about every time I use them. All right. Yeah, so that's not taking up that space. So I'll look into that offline. I'll write that down. Flex to get the list area filling. Cool. All right, so we'll come back to that. Let's just rerun the test here. Let's check my Git. No, I have actually changed something, so I want to check that out to get things clean. We'll rerun the test just to make sure I haven't broken anything. When tests are so easy to rerun, you might as well. Because if something goes red later, you want to know just what you've changed to make you end up there. Cool. So we've switched to the component library. I still think I might want to pull in React Native elements a bit later, but first what I want to do is make this modal an actual modal. So I accidentally did not do that last time, but it ended up being this fortuitous way to allow us to build it out together here and see how the, just to see how we can refactor things under test. So our modal is not actually a modal. Oh, I see that there's a change to the restaurant list file here. What is that? And Visual Studio Code is letting me know that the content on disk is newer. That's very nice. Thank you, Visual Studio Code. It's one of the niceties. All right, so we want our modal to be a real modal. All it's doing now is, test-driven development led us to get the things to pass. We just would return null if the visible property was not passed to this thing. But we're going to try to do something a bit nicer here. We've got our end-to-end test and our unit test covering us. So instead, we want to use an actual React Native modal. So let's import that. I think the way it displays went just fine. Maybe React Navigation has an option we'd like to use, but for now, a modal is just great. I'm not sure if a modal needs a wrapping view inside it, so we're going to find out. But I believe, yeah, visible equals visible. So our add restaurant modal is receiving a visible prop, and it's just passing it down to the internal modal that implements it. And to remind you where we're coming from, on the restaurant list, this allowed us to kind of have a nice add restaurant modal component that's just shown right here, and all the details of that component are separated out so we don't need to clutter up our restaurant list component with them. So we delegate to a modal, a built-in modal component inside to get the modalness working. And so now we don't need this return null because the modal itself is just not going to render. It has visibility hiding and showing handled. So let's save this and let's first see if the unit test works. I'm scrolling down and making more space for it because I'm not 100% sure it is going to work. We'll have to see. It passed. That's great. So now let's check our end-to-end test. And if I go back to this end-to-end test, I can see I'm not asserting everything. I am asserting afterwards that the restaurant name text field is no longer shown, so we're able to successfully hide it afterwards. So let's run with the tests as they are now, and if we find we'd like some more test coverage to prove that our modal is really working like a modal, maybe we'll add it at that time. We run the test, and we're going to watch, and we're going to see if the modal behaves modally. Yeah, there we go. It covers the component. That's a lot better. Maybe visually we can make things work better, but functionally at least, we're getting a modal to pop up. I think though, since we're covered by tests, we're going to do something that's super fancy for me. We're going to add a transition to that modal. That's something, yeah, animation type. That's totally a thing that React Native has. That's awesome. All right, let's go look up that component way over here on the cheater monitor. We're going to add it in. And again, it's just so easy to experiment with these things when you've got tests covering you. It's just, I love tests. I can't stop talking about them. And you're on the live stream, so obviously it makes sense for me to talk about them. So what animation type would we like to do? None, fade, or slide? Let's look at both of them. I mean, heck, we might as well look at both of them. Slide. I guess it's a string we pass in there. Let's, so it's hot reloaded. Yeah, all right. We don't have a cancel here in this modal. That's interesting. Let me add that onto the list. I think that's going to be more a future feature that I'll add. We can always just add more and more sushi places here. So that was the slide, and let's try the fade. All right, that was a quick fade. I think the slide is good for now. If y'all want something different, let me know. And actually, this is great. Hopefully I'll remember to ask about this at the end. But if you actually know more than nothing about visual design, you could actually do a pull request on our repo, and you can kind of tweak things a little bit more afterwards if you want. Or you could experiment with a different component library if you want and see how yours works under test here to see if the test ID identifiers work to be able to use accessibility to kind of continue to run your tests. So yeah, I'm going to encourage everyone afterwards as well, but feel free to fork the repo and make your own changes and see just how easy it is. Or maybe it's not. I know in React Web, some coworkers of mine ran into some trouble using testing libraries because test identifiers did not pass down from the third-party components down to the rendered DOM elements. So you should try in the environment that you're doing testing to see the constraints, how easy or hard it is to use different features with testing. All right, so our modal is a modal, and I think we're actually done. That was like really easy. So that's great. All right, so let's do it. Let's add the note in here about this. Make modal actually a modal. It's not ugly anymore. That's great. All right, cool. So I think now, as I said a few moments ago, I think the reason that I don't, what usually ends up happening for me to be able to fix this visual problem at the top with the status bar in iOS is that React Navigation or other navigation libraries handle it for me. And so I know that I'm going there, and so I suppose I could add a margin at the top, but it just feels kind of ugly. But I know for sure I'm going to use React Native Navigation. I've actually decided that, but we have not pre-baked this into the Yarn install. So let's pull up React Navigation, and let's install it. We're going to install it online, and maybe we'll just do some chatting if it takes a long time. I don't tell anyone, but I have to force quit my virus software sometimes to get npm installs to finish. It restarts itself within 15 seconds, so everything's fine and totally safe. But yeah, so we might need to do that. That'll be fun. Installation. All right, yeah, it's as simple as yarn add React Navigation. Now we are using React Native CLI, and so we have the option of using a different navigation library like React Native Navigation. You may not have done this before. Let's look it up. And we'll keep my virus scanner over up here. Yeah, virus scan is at 50% of CPU, so that's not very good. Having live streaming on probably doesn't help. And hopefully the yarn install doesn't kill the live stream, so we're just going to have to see about that. But yeah, in the meantime, we'll look up React Native Navigation. It's by Wix, the same organization that makes Detox. I'm a huge fan of them, and I definitely trust them. One of the advantages of React Native Navigation is that it's implemented with native code, so it's using native iOS and Android navigation tools and components, or classes, I should say. And so you might see if you're running into some performance problems with when your React navigation with a JavaScript-based navigation tool isn't totally smooth, you might want to reach for React Native Navigation. And when you're using React Native CLI, that's an option that you have. But I want to see how far I can go with React Navigation, because that's going to work for my other project as well. Cool, let's see what people are saying in the chat. It used to be the case with React Native Elements. It didn't pass the test ID. So progress. Yeah, that's absolutely great. CryoHell, thanks for joining in. Check out the recording later, and we hope to see you on a future week. All right, so with my virus scan force quitting, this has succeeded, in fact. And so React Navigation is ready for me to import stuff. And I'm totally going to use the cheater monitor as usual. Pull this up. Yeah, this is all being done live. I didn't prepare anything. But I think the last time that I did this, let me do a separate commit to do the adding of that. So add React Navigation. Amon himself says, hello, Burin. Please correct me on the pronunciations, folks. Thank you all for joining, and Burin joined as well. Hello, everyone. It's great to have folks in the chat. This is very exciting. All right, cool. So I made one commit of adding React Navigation itself, and now we're going to add the navigation library. So we're going to create, it's going to be straight up copying and pasting code, completely straight out of the docs. At least it's not off of Stack Overflow. So restaurant list is our screen. So that's what's going to be on there. Let's call it home for now. I think I like that. So we're creating the Stack Navigator, and I think they've already got, yeah, here we go. This is going to be nice. Const root stack. Let's create Stack Navigator, and then in the component, you render it out. Render the root stack. And this is just going to allow us to wrap with things like Redux stuff or MobX stuff or all kinds of other providers of things. Who knows what kind of state management we'll be able to use in the future. That's very exciting. So I think we don't need the view from React Native anymore. We are going to need create Stack Navigator. We're going to need to import that from somewhere. From React Navigation. Makes sense. Cool. All right, so our unit test passes, of course, because it doesn't have any concerns there. But yeah, I think this will work to show the first screen, and sure enough, it's actually hot reloaded itself. Let's rerun detox test. I do get a little bit nervous here if detox test is going to have any interactions with hot reloading, but I think it just kind of kicks off a reload of it, so it's fine. Good to see professional developers also copy paste from documentation. Absolutely. It's totally what I do. All right, cool. So we see that navigation has bumped us down from under the status bar, but it actually also doesn't show anything at the top of the navigation. So let's check the docs to see how that's done. I'm not going to bother moving that over to the other screen because you would just see me scrolling very rapidly. Yeah, I think moving between screens, I think it was on the screen itself. Configuring the header bar, there we go. So this is nice, very approachable docs. So on the screen itself, in your screen, you can put some configurations that relates to React navigation, static navigation options. And so if this component should always have the same title, I can do this right here. Title, restaurants. Cool. Let's see if that hot reloads. It does not appear to have, if I have done it correctly. Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. We've got restaurants showing up in the header bar. We've got it showing up double now because we still have that header in there. So let's just remove that. Hot reloading will probably help us out. So we don't need this text here anymore. We save, it reloads. And so now the button is bumping right up against the top bar. And so that's something I would ultimately like to improve, but maybe I would like to even change how the new restaurant button works. I'm not really sure. It's kind of like this is like an iterative approach, where first I just get the test passing, and now I'm trying to get like a basic look and feel that looks okay and not like ugly. And then like, you know, visual refinement is something I might do as a third pass. I like to work in passes like this. All right, so I think we no longer need the text element on this page, so let's delete that out. And we'll just rerun all the tests to make sure everything's still good. Burin says, Detox works with Expo too. Yes. So Burin, on a previous week, I had said that I had seen Detox's docs on that, and I give it Expo a quick try, and I had not been able to get it working. Things are a bit more complex because you don't have the native binary built for you. The Detox page on Expo walks you through that, and it should be just fine. But I was just running into an error, and I hadn't been able to get past it yet. So Burin, let me know, or anybody else, if you've actually worked with Detox with Expo yourself, that's actually really great. Like, let us know. And if so, probably I'll give it a try again, and I'll ping y'all with errors I get. I know the Detox team also is happy to help out. I really should ping them about that. I just haven't done that yet. Let me add that to my personal to-do list. On Expo. Cool. Okay, so to get back to things, we do have the navigation bar is showing up there. So this actually prepares us well, because when I do a upcoming feature very soon to tap on Sushi Place to get to the restaurant detail screen where I can enter different dishes for the restaurant, that's going to be really useful. And I forgot to recap at the start of the stream what it is we're building. So this is an app called Opinion 8. And it's a pun, like opinion space ATE. And so what this app is going to do is let us rate dishes we eat at restaurants. Different sushi dishes, different dishes at Thai restaurants in particular. Those are the two types of restaurants I love to go to. And I forget if I like or dislike different dishes. And it can differ from restaurant to restaurant. So that's what we're going to be building. So yeah, we're definitely going to need that navigation. But now we've got enough. Again, like this is interesting. I've installed the navigation library just enough to get the visuals to look a bit better for me. So it's kind of funny, right? Because like usually when you're building out an app, you might install navigation right away. And I probably would too, but I just kind of wanted to see how far we could go just with TDD, with just building the minimum features necessary. So let's commit what we have here. Add navigation. Let's say add stack navigator. Cool. Oh. Using my Git shortcuts wrong. All right, cool. So we've got this navigation. So the last remaining thing that I can think of right now that's ugly is this. When I open the modal, we don't get that navigation benefit. So like that title still goes on the top. So let's just do some basic styling on the add restaurant modal to fix that. If y'all have any like specific things you like to do to take care of this persistent status bar problem, definitely let me know. But I think probably we can just style this text element. Yeah. I think it's margin top. 20 feels like the number of pixels. Yeah, there it is. So that looks good enough. That's good enough for me for right now. My standards, as I've said many times, are very low when it comes to visuals. So this at least doesn't look horrible. I did just recall one other thing though. This is not a visual thing so much as a behavioral thing. But let's commit this first. And probably ultimately, if we found we had multiple modals that needed this, we'd put this style in some central place. We're going to wait until we get there. Part of the deal with TDD is not over-designing the structure of code from the start and just refactoring it as you go. So, fix status bar in modal. So this is not really a new feature so much as I feel like this is just a behavioral thing with the code that we have right now. It's clearing out the text field. So if I create Sushi Place 5 and then I create a new restaurant, Sushi Place 5 is still in there. And that's something we don't want to be the place. Oh, you know, I've already seen something. Notice how scatterbrained I am when it comes to this stuff. So I'd love a left margin on this text as well. So let's just do that. I'm gonna actually check the React Native docs to see if I can just put a margin all the way around the whole thing. Like that'd be really nice. Layouts. Margin. Yeah, let's just do margin all the way around. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, there's a little extra margin down below the contents there. That's fine. That's all good. So we'll add that. Yeah, margin 20, 1 pix off. Clearly, this is the username of a person that knows how to do layout. This is great. Cool. Okay, so that looks better. So now going back to what I was saying, you know, the fact that the restaurant name is not cleared out when I open the screen, like that's a behavioral problem. So I think, you know, in a big app, like you wouldn't necessarily need to write a test around that, but I think I want to. I think I want the safety of that. And so I don't know that I really want this cluttering up our end-to-end test. Some folks would say, yes, drive everything from the end-to-end test level, but I think this is nice and simple, and especially because our end-to-end tests they're going to get longer and longer as we build up the app further and further, so we want to avoid testing all the edge cases in there, and that's what can lead to an exponential increase in the amount of time your test suite takes. And so, I mean, you've seen just how fast our unit tests are. I save, and then within like 2 seconds, our test, you know, admittedly one test right now, but it's very quick to run. So I think a unit test is the best place for us to test this edge case. So let's see how we can do that. We want to test drive out. Again, we're going to do red, green, refactor. We want to test drive the fact that our text field gets cleared out when we submit our restaurant form. So right now in our add restaurant modal component test, we have one test case. It says, it calls the onSave handler with the entered text. So really what we're saying now is we're adding another behavior. We're saying there's something else we want our app to do when we click save. We also want to clear out the text field. So I think to start, let's just copy and paste the test we have, and then afterwards we're going to refactor out the duplication. And this will be useful because maybe you'll see this duplication in your tests in a real application, and this will help you identify the kind of refactoring that you can do, and also the fact that you don't need to beat yourself up over it thinking about how to structure your tests at the start. You can refactor as you go. So I've pasted this test in here, and let's say it clears the text field when submitted. So let's see here. We actually HandleSave. I think it's going to error out if we don't include this, but we're not going to need to check this right now. Well, you know what? Let's just leave it. Just leave this HandleSave function here. It's visible. It's visible. So wrapper find where restaurant text name field. Okay, yeah. So we're finding the text field and we're changing the text to this. We're finding the button and pressing it, and now we want to do an expectation on the text of that button. And I'm not sure how I've done this before, so I'm actually going to cheat again. I have so many ways that I cheat. And I'm going to check in my apps here. I have a website called Learn TDD in. I've mentioned it before. It's probably in the links. You can learn TDD in React Native. So you can actually walk through a similar exercise to what we did last time. And in here, I've actually got a test. And yeah, so I'm confirming in here, this is a preview of things to come. I'm confirming that clicking save in a different kind of app clears the message field. So I'm just going to copy this text over this assertion. It's great to have sample code that you can work off of to be able to see how you've done things before. So we're saying wrapper find where, and again, I'm going to do the ID for our app here. Test ID restaurant name text field. So okay, find restaurant name text field, and then we check, and let me actually do a little formatting here. Okay, so find the element with this ID, and then we check the value prop of it and check if it equals the empty string. So if you might be aware, if you're aware of another way we can in a component test using Enzyme to check the value, then let me know. That could be great. But this is the way I know how to do it, is to actually check the props, check the value prop of it, and check that it equals empty string. I'm thinking through if this makes sense right now. Let's give it a try. And let's zoom down to give more space for our component test here. All right, so check it out. Our component test is run. We've checked that we've called the onSave handler, and we checked that it clears the text field and is not clearing the text field. So this test is already pretty quick, but to show you a technique that I used, when you're using, Ooh, is this going to work with Jest? It might or it might not. It's interesting. It's interesting to tell. We're going to have to see as we go. I might actually desire to move away from Jest in the future. Oh, no, I know what I can do. So if you quit out of here, I need to check into this afterwards. You can pass a parameter to Jest. Yeah, let's actually see. Well, yeah, we'll try that later offline to pass a parameter to Jest. Let me make a pass parameter to Jest. I've made a note to myself to how to scope your test down. But at least within this one test, we can call .only on this test here, because this is the one we want to focus on. That's the only test will be run. So the other test is skipped, and just this failing test is being run now to give us quick turnaround time. Cool. So now we've specified, when I click save, when I press the save button, I want the text field to be cleared out. And so now we can implement this in our modal component. And the implementation here is pretty easy. All we need to do is, if you recall from last time, we have our button, we have a handle press save button method. It takes an onSave action handler that's passed into our component and calls it and passes the restaurant name out. So really all we want to do is set the state. Set state, because our add restaurant modal has some local component state for this transient state for the state of the form. And so we just want to change restaurant name back to empty string. So let's see if this does it. And it passes. This is great. So pressing the save button clears things out. And so now we can take our .only back out. You never want to commit your .onlys. Definitely do that at work from time to time. Cool, so all of our unit tests are passing. We want to rerun our end-to-end test just to make sure this hasn't broken anything. And then after that, we can actually kind of just click around and do some manual testing afterwards. Again, that's one of the nice things about Detox is that it runs in the real simulator. It leaves the app up and running for you afterwards so you can click around. So our end-to-end test is still passing. And now the moment of truth. Now we can click on New Restaurant and see if it clears out the form or not. And it does. That's great. Cool, so we can go in here and say steak place. Save the restaurant and we're good to go. Very nice. I think if we had a test to add another restaurant, we would have run across this because we would have seen, when we pulled up the form and saw the text field, we would have gotten, if we would try to type in steak place, the automated test would have resulted in create a restaurant called Sushi Place Steak Place, which maybe is the name of a very fashionable surf and turf restaurant, but it's not what our test would be looking for. So this is great. I think a lot of our refactoring has gone really well. I still would like to put in a cancel here because maybe you don't always want to have a new restaurant. Nothing. But we'll save that feature for next time. This feels like good progress. Let's be sure to commit our change here. This is all good. Oh yeah, we got to refactor our test. I knew there was something else we wanted to do. So let's go ahead and commit it because we want to make sure we don't break this test. We'll commit the test as is. Clear out restaurant field between submissions. All right, so now as our last thing we can do in the stream today, we're going to refactor the test a bit. So if you haven't done a ton with Jest or with Mocha before, you can use blocks called before each blocks to pull things out. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to actually give this a descriptive context because maybe in the future there's other things we're going to want to do for add restaurant modal, like that cancel button next time, for example. So we're going to describe, I'm going to say, this is for when we, upon submit, or when submitting, you could say. And so one quick note, in some approaches you might say, well, why did I bother to create another test at all? Just like put another expectation down in the same test. So you're going to see here, as we extract out some duplication here, that this approach to testing, it really encourages to have one small thing that you're expecting or checking per test. The phrase that was used sometimes was one assertion per test or one expectation per test. Sometimes you don't do quite that much. Sometimes you might actually have two expect statements in there in a given test, but it's asserting or expecting one very focused thing per test. And so let's make this change, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we say these both relate to upon submit. So we'll just copy both of these test cases into here. And our test is going to be rerunning as we go just to make sure things are working all the way along the way. You don't necessarily need to keep them running all the way along the way, but it can be useful. So now we've said both of these are upon submit. So what duplication can we pull out? Well, this message text can be pulled out here. nice thing about JavaScript scoping is that these variables are just available for any of these nested blocks. That's good to go. So as long as we're not changing them, nothing goes wrong there. What else are we going to do? HandleSave, I'm going to want to handle a bit differently. Do we want to create our wrapper in there? You know, even these steps, I kind of would like to do in a before each. Yeah, so let's do a before each block. And there's lots of different ways you can arrange your tests. So try different things and see how they go. We need to get access to HandleSave. So let's create a let here. This is a variable we can assign to multiple times. And then each time in the block, we're going to assign to HandleSave. So just by referring to the HandleSave variable here, it's going to assign it to the binding, the variable that was created up at this level. And so now I can remove both of these. And let's, I think the test is going to fail now because wrapper is not available down here. Let's confirm that. Yep, that does fail. And it says wrapper is not defined. So I think, oh, yeah, we are going to need the wrapper down in test because even if we move, I do want to move these steps up here because they're duplicated. Like this block is for upon submit. And so for each test we're doing here, this is the doing of the submit. So this is shared. We want to share that. So let's just delete that out. But I think we're going to get the same error. And the reason is still wrapper is not defined. So just like we're saving this HandleSave just mock function because we want to access it down in the test, we're going to save wrapper up here as well. So let wrapper, we assign to it here, and then I think we're going to be good to go. There's a few chats have come in, so let me get this passing, then I'm going to check on those. Yeah, so check it out. So we're saying upon submit, we always want to do this, like set up our component, type, and simulate. And now what are the two things we're checking? We're checking that it clears the text field, and we don't need to say when submitted anymore. So we say upon submit, it clears the text field, and we check that. And upon submit, it calls the onSave handler with the entered text. And that's right there. That's great. Cool. This is a nice focus text. And like, check out the outline we're given by Jest. Add restaurant modal. Upon submit, it clears the text field and it calls the onSave handler with entered text. Cool. Let me check out the chats and see what you folks have been up to. I'm on talking about focusing on Android. Cool. Yeah, so Aman, I mentioned earlier that Detox does support Android. It came more recently than iOS, but I haven't played with it, so you could definitely consider trying that out. Cool. Yes, the wrapper is in the wrong scope. Quack, who I know to be actually named Sam. I just outed you. Hello. Yes, WS Ubi. So the tools that I'm using, thank you for asking that. If you go to, I think the links on the stream have information about this. But if you go to, in the stream links, we link to my project, which is, not that. Let's do a little Twitchception and go to my page here and stream this. This could be bad. This could be a bad idea. So let's just get the video off the screen. So we link to React Native TDD stream. So this is the project that you could pull up to take a look at the code, but you could also go to reactnativetesting.io, and this is a website that I'm using to put together information about different ways to do testing. And I talk about component tests using Enzyme and end-to-end tests using Detox. And there are instructions in here for how to set these tools up. Also, part 1 of my stream, if you check on Twitch or on YouTube, you can see part 1 where we walk through setting them up together. So check those out. All right, so we need to commit this change. Yep. And one more note just in passing. So this approach of having one expectation per test is very useful in component tests and unit tests to get this nice outline. And you see that it still ran in just 2 seconds. It was still very fast, even though it was literally going through this setup again every time. It's good to kind of reset your state between each test to prevent any leakage, to prevent state changes from leaking over from one test to the other, to be causing problems and making your tests independent on one another, because this way we can rerun any of our individual tests as often as we want. But for end-to-end tests, we tend to stay away from that, and that's because end-to-end tests are much slower. And so for end-to-end tests, it's best to use what's called a feature tour approach, where you just go through a long sequence of steps, and that keeps things running as efficiently as possible to avoid your test suite ballooning in size. All right, well, I think that's a good place to be. If we look back over our test here, the branch that we've been on, we switched to React Native Elements. We made the modal actually a modal. We've added React Native navigation. That's going to be useful for next time. We fixed the status bar for how it shows up. And we added a feature to clear out the restaurant name field. Cool, so that was a lot of fun. As always, I'm going to push up a branch for this so you can actually see the pull request to see the changes we looked at. I would encourage anyone to pull down the repo to give the project a try locally. It'd be great even just to see the test running, to see what it feels like to be able to make the changes. This week in particular, you could definitely play around with making some visual changes just to see how nice it is to rerun the tests. Certainly, if you have a good design sense, I'd love it if anyone wanted to submit a PR with visual improvements or things like that. And then next time we're going to jump into building additional features, and you'll get to see what it looks like to start a new feature with a new end-to-end test and how that interacts with our existing tests and code. So I really appreciate everyone joining in. The chat was really active this time. I look forward to hearing from y'all. Please chat me again sometime, or follow me at Coding It Wrong on Twitter, or hit me up on Reactiflux as Josh Justice. Again, I just love talking about these things. If you have a question or a suggestion or a library to look into for React Native, I'll definitely do so. And definitely hit me up with any testing questions you have or stories you have about what's working well or what's working poorly for you in testing. Let's share this knowledge back and forth. There's a lot of knowledge to share in the React Native world about testing, and I've gotten the fortune of working on some different platforms and seeing what works elsewhere. So let's figure out together what works best for us on React Native, and we all have different experiences, but we can explore it together. I really appreciate y'all joining the stream or checking out the recording afterwards. And yeah, I'm Josh. I'm coding it wrong. You can evaluate whether I was coding it wrong or not, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks a lot. And as always, flop over to the thanks for watching screen. See ya.